So the next session we have is going to be Empowering Voices, Crafting Your PBC Narrative. So again, this whole conference is really about empowering connections. The other thing about that is empowering connections by engaging with others. And what we've done is worked with Jessica Lynn and Heather Clark. They're from Patient Worthy. Jessica Lynn is a content and community manager. So this is going to be an interactive session both now, and then we're going to have some workshopping portions after lunch. So for this session now, we'll all be in here. For the session after lunch, we'll have patients in the Arizona room. We'll have patients and care partners over here. But for now, we're focused, we're in here. And some of the key topics that Jessica is going to be covering, or Jessica, is going to be covering is, the importance of storytelling, crafting your narrative, amplifying your voice, and the navigating some of the challenges, right? So some of those challenging situations you have to talk through. So there's more details in the app again. And I don't think, do you have any polling questions within the app?
I had put some up beforehand,
Okay.
but none for the session itself.
Okay, so if we need to pull some of those up, we'll pull those up as well. But again, check out the questions in the session, and we'll have Jessica come up now to speak to us.
Thank you. All right, hello everybody. It's an absolute delight to be with you all here today. My name is Jessica, and I'm here with Heather. Before we dive into our session, I want to first just thank the PBCers for having us here today. I think this is such a phenomenal organization, and it's so clear how connected and unified this community is. I'm really inspired by the dedication to bringing the community together and really honored to be a part of this conference today. I think it's through events like this that we get to really witness the camaraderie, the community, the resilience, and the strength that we have within this community. And I'm just excited to talk to you a little bit more about storytelling. So welcome to Empowering Voices, Crafting Your PBC Narrative. Today is all about the power of storytelling. Your voice matters, and I want you to leave today's session feeling comfortable, confident, and capable of sharing the aspects of your experience that mean something to you. Each of us holds a unique story within ourselves, whether that's regarding your PBC or outside of it. But that story has the potential to inspire, connect, and spark change. And for those of you who are eager to dive a little bit more deep into the art of storytelling, we are holding the workshop after lunch in the Arizona room. So we're going to be getting a little more hands-on there. And we're going to have a session that's full of creativity, laughter, connection, and tons of brainstorming, so you don't want to miss it. In our time together today, we'll be talking about 3 key areas. So the first is the importance of storytelling, and we'll explore how storytelling acts as a bridge, which allows us to forge meaningful connections, raise awareness, and ultimately make a difference not only in your own life, but in the life of others. Then we'll roll up our sleeves and we'll get into the details about the effective tips, tricks, and strategies to structure your story in a way that resonates with other people while staying true to your experiences. And I also want you to put a pin in details, because that's going to be something that we're going to talk about later that's really important, is the use of details when you're telling your story and when you're crafting your narrative. And finally, we're going to talk about navigating challenges. Even the most experienced storytellers face challenges and hurdles within their process, and I want to give you a way to be able to navigate those with ease. PBCers, today is about embracing the power of your voice to shine a light on both your individual journeys and our collective journeys. Before we dive in further, I want to introduce myself. So my name is Jessica Lynn. I'm currently a freelance college admissions consultant, a freelance writer with over 10 years of experience, and the content and community manager for Patient Worthy, which is a rare disease media website. I've been on the Patient Worthy team for 4 years, and it's been a really wonderful experience, not only to learn about my own set of rare diseases, which I'll talk about in a minute, but how to empower the community as a whole. My work as a writer has taken me into a lot of different industries and topics. I've written about everything from how to be an advocate when you're talking to your doctor and newborn screening policy on Capitol Hill, to the 84 flavors of popcorn at my favorite popcorn maker down in Florida. So if anybody wants some popcorn recommendations, come over here because I've got some for you. But writing about rare disease and chronic illness holds a particular importance to me because it's a big part of my journey. So as you can tell from my very cute baby picture on the screen, I was once actually pretty adorable. But as a child, I was also a very difficult child to deal with, not in terms of mood or attitude, but in terms of the fact that I was pretty constantly sick. So starting when I was about this old, I had repeated ear infections. I had a chronic cough. My dad still tells me that I've been coughing for about 35 years now. Haven't been alive that long, but you know. I had lung infections, chest infections, to the point that my parents would take me to the doctors over and over and over again. It got to the point where I am still, as an adult, pretty terrified of needles because of how often I was poked and prodded as a kid. All of the tests came back negative, and my doctors told my parents that I just had allergies and that they just didn't show up on the screen. 31 years later, we're finally at the point of nailing down my specific immune deficiency. It's been a journey. May have taken the last 3 years of fighting, 7 allergy tests, sinus surgery, firing my first doctor, and more blood tests than I could count, but we're finally almost at a diagnosis. My other 2 rare conditions was Kawasaki disease when I was 4 years old, as well as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which I was just diagnosed with a few months ago, mean that on my journey, I have to constantly be checking how my heart is performing. I participate in physical therapy twice a week to make sure that my joints are doing what they're supposed to, and I still somehow have to get more blood tests than you could possibly imagine. Coming to terms with these diagnoses has been challenging at times, but it's also taught me so much. It's taught me the value of my words, the power I have as an advocate, the importance of raising awareness, and most of all, the impact of knowing that you're not alone in what you're going through. I may not have PBC, but I do understand what it's like to have a condition that can be difficult to explain to people. I understand how exhausting it can be to have to defend and prove how you feel day in and day out because maybe you look fine. People look at you and they can't understand the itchiness or the fatigue, the brain fog, the discomfort that you face on a daily basis. And when it comes to telling your story, I understand how frightening it can be to open up and share the vulnerable parts of yourself. I want you to know that you're not alone in this journey. You're not alone in the way that you feel. And I hope you know that no matter where you are in your personal experience, you know that what you have to say is valid. The experiences that you've been through are valid. And what you have to say does deserve to be heard. Now, the great Maya Angelou once said, "There's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you." As many people in this room know, living with a rare chronic condition can be challenging. And if you're the loved one of someone with PBC, you also know that your loved one is dealing with something. Together, you're trying to figure out what that means for you and your family, how to talk to doctors, how to deal with insurance, which I'm sure everybody has had one of those experiences, and how to remain resilient and find hope in the face of what you're going through. But because of that, I'm very confident that everybody in this room has a story to share. Sharing your story serves as a bridge to connect with others, both within and beyond this community. Stories help us work collaboratively with researchers, legislators, advocates, policymakers, family makers, industry leaders, and most importantly, each other. When you share your story, you bring PBC to light. You offer insights into your lived experiences and the challenges you face because you're the experts. Through storytelling, we can also foster empathy, understanding, and solidarity. We learn to connect and to navigate our journeys, which also extends into policy and research. By sharing your story, you can catalyze change, drive policy, and shape research in so many ways. We know that the patient voice in many cases is often excluded from discourse into what would be the best moves for us medication-wise or research-wise. But by sharing your story, you can change the trajectory for people across the globe. To me, that's what Philip Pullman means when he says, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the things we need most in the world because stories give us life. Now, before this session, I put up a poll on Whova to ask what some of the barriers everyone has to sharing their story. A few things that stood out to me. One is fear and anxiety. It can be a little bit overwhelming to have to share your story, and opening up and again, being vulnerable can be frightening. You don't know how you'll be received or if you're using the right words. And if you've dealt with situations like medical gaslighting in the past, when you've been told that you're crazy or your symptoms aren't real, then it can be honestly traumatic to have to dig that up. I know that personally, I'm also prone to self-doubt, thinking that my story wouldn't be impactful or that I don't have enough to say. But I want to once again reaffirm that your stories and your experiences matter. Your voice is your superpower, and your story, no matter how ordinary it might seem to you, has the potential to resonate with somebody else. In our next session, I am going to go over a case study that goes a little bit deeper into that, someone who shared their story, didn't expect much feedback, and got a whole lot of outreach from that. So I want you to know that someone out there is looking to connect. They feel alone or confused, and your story has the potential to shine a light for others. So shine brightly. There are some other roadblocks on the way to self-expression, a lack of support, an issue with privacy, or not knowing the right words to share, having a lack of opportunity. So here's what I want to recommend. First, find your community and your support system. Seek out opportunities to share wherever and whenever you can. You can write an article for Patient Worthy. I'd be happy to work with you. But Carol also has the Array in Tallulah, I believe, story sharing for the website, so consider taking a crack at that. You can contact your local news. You can share your experiences on social media. You can go to conferences or apply for a grant. Even if not everybody understands what you're going through or what your story means, these opportunities beget opportunities, and those connections beget connections. So the more you reach out, I think you'll be surprised at who reaches back. When it comes to privacy, it's essential to respect your boundaries. Only share what you feel comfortable sharing. Remember that you're in control of your story. It's okay to set boundaries, and it's okay to keep certain details private. I've had people during the course of our interviews say, I want to provide this for context, please don't put it in the story. It's also okay to just say, I don't really want to discuss that. Your story is yours to tell, and you have every right to determine how much you want to share. And finally, if you're struggling to find the right words, and I know this sounds simple and a little bit, silly, do your best. One way that I've found is easy for me is kind of distilling down the language a little bit. So when it comes to my specific rare disease, I could say, my B cells and T cells don't quite work right. My complement pathway is dysregulated, which means that I'm open to opportunistic infections. You get the gist of what I'm saying there, but you don't really know how to engage with that. Instead, what I tell people usually is your immune system usually protects you against bacteria that it's fought before. Mine doesn't remember anything, so every bacteria I meet, it's like, hello, it's nice to meet you. So that for me is a starting point for an easier conversation. It can sometimes feel frustrating, I know, to have to distill down that. And I know that in distilling down what you've been through, you don't always get across the depth of what you've dealt with. But it does open the door to questions and opportunities for people to raise their awareness while you also get to share what's impacted your journey. Also, don't be afraid to ask for help. Talk to a friend, a therapist, a writing coach, your mirror, your journal. The more you brainstorm, the easier it'll get. Sometimes if you're talking to someone else too, a fresh perspective can help you find the right words or uncover something. But I want to remind you that there's no right way to tell your story, so don't get caught in that trap. Another obstacle that I've personally noticed and something that I want to address today is that most people don't consider themselves to be a storyteller. But I think that everybody's a storyteller. You tell stories every single day about what you did for work, what you did at home, your families, your interests. So you engage with others through telling stories. And like I said before, there's no right way to do it. If writing isn't working, try singing a song. Write a poem. If you don't know where to focus, keep a list with the key terms or ideas or points that you want to get across. Pick the moment that you think is the most dramatic in your whole journey. Share a lesson you've learned. Talk about your medication. Think about research you want to see done and link it to what you've personally gone through. Don't feel constrained by expectations because this is about you, your story, and telling it the way that you want. Today, I want to talk about some effective storytelling techniques that'll hopefully make this a little bit easier for you. So first, authenticity is key. Authenticity is the most profound aspect of impactful storytelling. When you share your story, whether it's your triumphs or your trials, consider authenticity to be your guiding star. You want to invite people into your experience and the raw depths of what you've been through. So be genuine and true to yourself. Speak from your heart and use your voice and your language. I find that people are often trying to shape their stories into what they think other people want to hear. But when you cut away aspects of what you've been through to please other people, then you're selling yourself short. My esteemed colleague, which some of you in the room might know, Kathy Devaney, once said, "Don't mistake other stories for your own." It can be tempting to compare your stories to the people around you or measure your successes against someone else's yardstick. But comparison is the thief of joy. Your story is yours, and it's that uniqueness that makes it so powerful. Authenticity isn't about perfection, it's about being real. And when you are authentic, then magic happens. You deepen your connections with other people, you build trust, and you have people feeling like they're right there with you on your path. So don't let your thoughts overshadow your voice. Embrace the beauty of your narrative because your story is worthy. You're worthy, and what you've been through is deserving of recognition. And when you share that authentically, you empower other people to do the same thing. Next, I want to talk about emotions, which are the heart and soul of storytelling, and they breathe life into what you're going through. Don't be afraid to share your emotions. Sometimes you've been through something and it was really hard, and it's okay to acknowledge that. Some of the most powerful interviews I've done have brought me to tears. And so I just want people to know that you don't have to hide how you're feeling. At the same time, I want to caution everybody not to lean too hard into anger or frustration. I know that we've all had an experience probably with a doctor or a physician, a family member who doesn't necessarily understand what you're going through. But don't let your story become an admonition of someone else, because that's, again, taking away from what you've been through. You're not defined by those moments, and neither is your experience. Be vulnerable. Vulnerability means sharing what is important to you and what feels right. When you share your story, you might feel the pressure to be perfect or to have the perfect tale to tell. But I want people to know that you don't have to be perfect. You don't even have to be inspirational. Your story is yours. It's your life, and you can tell it the way that you want. Not everything is sunshine and rainbows. So take a moment to reflect on the details that you want to share and the emotions that you want to get across, and remember that it's also okay to leave things unsaid. Finally, I want to talk clarity. And something that I noticed is, I sent the right PowerPoint here. In my PowerPoint on my computer, it said research there still. And I was going to say that that actually proves a point of you want to make sure that you're being clear with what you're trying to say because you don't want your ideas to get muddled. When we tell people about our lives, it's sometimes easy to skip over things because you know your life and not everybody else does. But your audience might not be able to walk in your shoes. In fact, they might not even know what kind of shoes you're wearing. So it's important to paint a picture. Let's say you're sharing a story about the moment that you learned about your PBC diagnosis. What did you hear? What did you smell? What did you see? What did you feel? What were your first thoughts? Did you feel relieved because you had an answer? Or did you feel scared? Who was the first person that you called? Remember, to help people understand and to share the impact of your experience, you don't want to just tell people what you went through, you want to be able to show them. Now, speaking of details, raise your hand if you have one of those friends who is always telling a story, but they keep adding detail after detail after detail after detail. You know, you're learning about a new project that they're working on, but you're 25 minutes into the conversation, and you've learned about the squeaky wheel on their desk chair at work, the cup of coffee they drank, everything they saw that day on their way into the office, how they feel about the meeting they have that morning. But all of a sudden, like, you don't even know what project they're talking about. You don't know where they're going with it. And eventually, as they keep adding details, you kind of disengage a little bit. Now raise your hand if you are that friend, because it's me. So brevity and picking the right details is something that I've struggled with for a while, both as a writer and as a speaker. I have so much to say, and in my head, I have so little time to say it that I just blah, 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 blah. But when it comes to storytelling, you want to pick the details that are important so that you don't overwhelm. Excessive details can bog down what you're saying, and it can take away from the point. So it's important to try and strike the right balance between what you're saying and the vivid picture that you're trying to paint. One way to do this is to pick a specific point in your story, something that you want to talk about and really focus on, rather than trying to encompass the whole spectrum of what you've been through. This can be really tailored to you and your interests because, again, authenticity is really key here. But it should also focus on who are you speaking with and what kind of story are you trying to get across, and what is most important to you within that moment. So if you're talking to industry about the importance of patient perspectives in clinical trials, you're going to be talking about something different than you might be talking about if you speak to me for a story on our website. It might be about your patient perspective when you've been in trials, or the barriers that have kept you from joining research studies, whereas with me, you might want to talk about mindfulness, or the best way to manage your symptoms. If you're talking to other people in the community, you might want to talk about advocacy, or again, symptom management, knowing what questions to ask to your doctor. So by focusing on those details, you can get across a clearer story and a clearer pathway. I also find that it's really helpful to stop and ask myself questions. So, does this detail contribute to what I'm trying to say? Is this essential to understanding the point that I'm trying to get across? If it's not, consider whether you have to include it in your story, because being intentional is really what's going to make that impact and get your story across. There are a few pitfalls to writing your story, and like you might have noticed from the survey that we did, there are a few things, the lack of support, the privacy, and the lack of opportunity that are kind of carried over. They're either barriers or pitfalls that you're facing. I want to reinforce that the best way to overcome a lack of support and a lack of community is to do that outreach. These conferences are really great to be able to connect and to find ways to do that. And if people don't believe in you in your everyday life, believe in yourself, because I know that your story is important. What you have to say also is. One of the biggest pitfalls you might deal with is either writer's block or speaker's block, not knowing the right words to say. And I know it's counterintuitive because really the last thing that I want to do when I'm having writer's block is write, but that's what you should do. It can also be free writing, free speaking to your mirror, getting into a new location and trying to shift your mindset that way. Just let yourself be uninhibited. And don't try and nail yourself down. When you're done, and I stress the done part, then look at what you said. If you try and edit in the moment, then you're thinking too much about how you sound and not about what you're putting down. So I always tell people, although there is a big push, or you might feel like you have to edit as you go, don't. Let yourself say what you have to say. As I said earlier, also, comparison is the thief of joy. And when you strive for perfection and you compare yourself with other people, you might feel a point where you get stuck and you're unable to get your point across. Storytelling is a process. Your drafts don't have to be perfect. They are never going to be perfect. Perfection is unachievable, and frankly, when we strive for it, it can be harmful to yourself. Your story doesn't need to be perfect because it's yours. Sometimes you look back and you say, oh my God, I can't believe I used that word. Or I was on a podcast and they played it back to me beforehand and I was like, oh my God, that's what I sound like on tape? And sometimes you're gonna be in those situations when you're sharing your story and it's not gonna be everything that you wanted to get across. But just remember that this is a learning process. Telling your story, sharing your story, doing everything to get that out of you isn't supposed to be right the first time. It's okay to make mistakes. Let yourself be imperfect because that's where you find growth. And if you're looking for some concrete help on improvement, seek out some feedback. Most importantly, be willing to try. Recognize that every aspect of what you're sharing is important, even if you don't think it's big or impactful or joy-filled. In my role as a college advisor, I tell a lot of my students that you don't have to have a big topic for people to listen. You just have to be able to tell it with authenticity and know that you're going to make a difference. Sometimes it's the smallest moments and the quiet whispers that resonate the loudest. It's the simple act of sharing your story, no matter how seemingly insignificant it is, that creates change. So take that leap of faith. Know that your story, which is imperfect and flawed and beautifully human, has the power to touch hearts, and it has the power to inspire other people to do the same. Thank you so much, PBCers. I would like to open the floor for questions if we have the time, but if not, I will take any questions after lunch. You can also come find me during the course of the conference here today and tomorrow, and I would be happy to chat.
Cool. Yeah, Jessica, I had a question for you. One of the things that I think is important is, not only do we have a lot of patients here, we also have a lot of the care partners as well. So having dealt with Carol while she was going through the transplant and trying to deal with the fuzzy brain and stuff, I understand kind of my story, not that it's to usurp or take over a patient's story, but I just wondered, as far as like some of the care partners and them sharing their story with the doctors, sharing their story and their beloved's story as well, how do you kind of balance that aspect of sharing as a patient advocate or a care partner?
Well, I think that when it comes to care partners, I think there's a renewed push right now for people to be able to talk. I think that's something that has been a struggle within the rare community for a while. I think that care partners should also know that what you go through is valid. The emotions that you feel are also valid. You deserve to have some self-care as well. And of course, the person that you love, that you're caring for, has their own story to tell, but if you are a care partner, don't let your story and your needs get, I don't want to say overshadowed. I don't feel like overshadowed is the right word here, but you're also allowed to talk about how it's impacted you. Mm-hmm. Because when you're dealing with a rare diagnosis, and this is a misconception I think I've seen from the general community, a lot of people think that only the person that has the rare condition is kind of dealing with that impact. But the truth is that a rare diagnosis resonates throughout your family, throughout your friends, throughout your care partner. So if you are a care partner, you can, speak about the person that you're caring for, their journey and what they've been through. But you are also allowed to talk about how you feel.
Great. And Leslie, were there any other questions?
One, what advice would you provide to diverse patients who might be looking to encourage others to share their story?
So I love that because I think that that's something that we definitely need more of. The first thing that I would say is get in touch. If you would like to, get in touch with organizations that have that as a center point. I know at PatientWorthy, something that we've really been highlighting over the last year or so is working on integrating diverse voices into our podcast, into our stories, opening up those spaces for people to be able to come to us and say, hey, I have a story to tell. I think there are a lot of different organizations that really are looking for that perspective right now. I would also say if you are a diverse patient and you have social media, that's a good way to start getting your voice out there, being able to use those hashtags and build that community and that audience that can come to you. I know that it can be frustrating sometimes to have people come to you instead of being able to just share your story and have it recognized right away. But I think that social media and video can be great tools to disseminate your story a little bit wider and reach a wider audience and begin building that awareness that these are voices that also need to be heard.
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll have time. We appreciate, Jessica, your time here. And to remind everybody as well, we're going to be breaking for lunch. Yeah. Charlene, did you want to touch on some of the ways to contact you as well?
Yes. So I just wanted to say that if anybody wants to speak more, has any other questions, or you're interested, in speaking a little bit more, doing an interview, sharing your story, finding ways to do that, please feel free to contact me. That's my email, jessica@patientworthy.com. I also run our Twitter page right now, so if you ever contact us on Twitter, you're really just talking to me. So feel free to just shoot me a message and say, hey, Jessica, I'm going to talk about my story. But I would love to connect with everybody, and again, thank you so much for having me.
Great. Thank you.